Welcome to the Amplified CEO with VC and serial entrepreneur Richard Stroupe. With today's special audio-only episode, where 4 Purdue University entrepreneurship students turn the tables and ask Richard what it really takes to build, scale, and invest in companies.
So good evening, Richard. It's so nice to see you finally. How are you doing?
Good. How are y'all today?
We're all good as well. A quick introduction to Richard. Richard is a seasoned entrepreneur and a technologist whose career is a masterclass in building, leading, and scaling. He's worked for over 30 years in software development and professional services. And he's just done it all, from balance sheets to code. He has not only bootstrapped and sold 1 software service company, but 2. And currently he's managing ventures from student housing to resorts to venture capital. He's truly doing it all. And he still finds time to host his own podcasts, which is honestly, we're all in awe of you. A proud Boilermaker as well.
Absolutely.
He is absolutely motivated by curiosity and growth of everyone around him and himself as well.
Thank you for the introduction. It's nice to meet everybody.
It's nice seeing you. My name is Kea Jadhav. I'm a sophomore in computer science. And these are my colleagues. We're all from Entrepreneurship 200, which is a class led by Professor Jorge Romero Day. And it's a class about introduction to innovation and entrepreneurship.
I'm Matthew Mitchell. I'm a sophomore studying agricultural economics.
I'm Amelia Farrow. I'm a junior studying general management.
I'm Madison Hammond. I'm a sophomore studying management and accounting.
All right. Nice to see everybody.
Do you have a few words to share with us today?
I'm just excited to jump into the interview and to answer any questions you have about my own personal journey or experiences or just views on today's capital markets or startup landscape.
Okay, then let's get right into it.
So I have the first question. How do you think mentorship and education help shape future entrepreneurs? If you could change how entrepreneurship is taught, what would you do differently based on your own experience?
Absolutely. So I feel education accelerates pattern recognition while mentorship prevents expensive mistakes effectively. So most founders waste years learning what structured education and learning from mentors could teach in weeks. For example, when I joined Harvard's OPM program, it's an executive ed program out of the Harvard Business School, where we spent 9 weeks spread over 3 years learning from other business leaders around the world and deep case studies of other businesses. That completely transformed my own business trajectory. The program actually paid for itself in the first year with my first mergers and acquisitions deal that I closed shortly after Unit 1. So effectively, it compressed decades of learning into 9 weeks, which reinforces my belief that the most expensive education is learning everything yourself. Smart entrepreneurs buy speed instead of paying with time. Learning from other failures accelerates your growth without having to experience the pain firsthand. My teaching philosophy, because I also teach my own executive ed class, it's a resort for CEOs, really centers on forcing clarity. You can't teach what you truly don't understand. So you have to break it down into the exact systems that work, not just the stories after the fact. So if I help 10 founders skip $2 million of mistakes that I've made, that creates $20 million of collective value just from one painful lesson. So that compounding impact, watching founders unlock what they truly are capable of, is what drives everything that I do now.
Awesome. So the next question we have for you is that in 2012, you did an interview with Bryn Copen and said a top 10 way to become a successful entrepreneur was to, quote, make a decent profit decently, end quote. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
Yes. Making a decent profit decently really means building sustainable profit with integrity and business ethics rather than unsustainable growth with corners cut. It's applying my own blue-collar work ethic to sophisticated business models, to grow on 15-20% annually with clean operations rather than 200% with hidden dysfunction or corrupt business practices. It starts with unit economics. Ensure every transaction creates value before scaling volume. Focus on gross margin expansion, not just revenue growth. Build systems that work long-term, not just short-term hacks that create technical debt, is what I refer to as something that looks good, but when you try to expand it or maintain it, everything gets much harder or expensive. Create value for customers, employees, and investors simultaneously, rather than optimizing for one stakeholder at others' expense. Steady compounding beats dramatic spikes followed by crashes. How you make money matters just as much as how much you make. Reputation capital compounds over decades. So it's really about building something that your kids and family and your friends and colleagues will respect, not just what impresses investors in the short term.
That's great. Thank you. Our next question is, you mentioned helping founders or pressure test their business models. Could you walk through a time when you helped a founder realize their model was not scalable and what strategic pivots made the difference?
Yeah, it's interesting because in my class not too long ago, because what I have them do is effectively come in and pitch their business. What do they do? How do they do it? Who do they do it for? And what's their top 3-5 business challenges? And during that process, I call it business X-ray. It really throws all your cards on the table. So business owners have to be vulnerable to a period of time to really understand what their business issues are. And sometimes it could be their own issues, like they're causing their own problems. In one case, a business owner, after the class came to me and told me that he decided to close his business because in the end, not only am I trying to save themselves from failure, their own business, but also trying to return time, because really time is the precious commodity that we all have. So if their time is better spent on another venture, then that's also a win for me as well. So he decided to close his business and operate something completely different, because we all carry some cognitive bias. We all believe that our solution and our product is the best one out there. And that's why I have to spend a lot of time talking to your customers and getting feedback and doing incremental development and not just building something that you think the customer wants, but more what they need. So it's a hard lesson to have, especially learning that your business really isn't scalable, or it's not something that customers really want. Another example, I invested in a company really early, and they spent 2 or 3 years and probably about, I'd say $10 million in operational costs working down a path, and they found that it wasn't successful or scalable, and they had to do a hard pivot. And sometimes it's a hard decision to look in the mirror and say, yeah, I have to do a hard pivot. But they did. And after about 2 or 3 years of a little bit of storming and performing, things settled, and now they're almost a $2 billion company. So it really does pay to make hard decisions early and to figure out where your customers are and what kind of business you want to build, and then building those systems to make it scalable.
Thank you. The fourth question I have for you are, what are common red flags that many investors like yourself walk away from an otherwise promising company?
Red flags. Yeah, that's always a good one to talk about. There's several red flags, because I think founders, people that are launching their businesses can establish a really big ego, and they can think they're better than other people, that they're smarter, and they can do things that the average person can't do. So I look for the individuals and what type of background they have, what their ego is, their personality. Do they take things serious, or are they complacent? Do they have a sense of urgency? Do they have grit? Do they have experience in handling pressure? So I look at the person that's leading the business, and then obviously I look at their team, the team themselves and their background, figuring out, is this somebody I want to invest in? Having a large ego or not understanding your business model fully is a major red flag. Obviously, not understanding your numbers. If a business owner can't tell me about their business or why they started it, or their customer's pain, and why their product is going to solve this pain, and talk about the financials and the unit, the economics, that's also another red flag. And that's typically for early stage founders, to college to early 20s. Then if you look at founders like in their late 20s, 30s, and 40s, obviously we look for experience, domain experience. A lot of time people go into industry and work 5, 10, 15 years before they launch a business. So we look at their experience, their background, their pedigree. So we want to make sure that they understand what they're talking about. And then obviously what team they have. And then we ask questions about the financials. And typically if they don't understand the unit economics, especially when it comes to scaling and raising capital, because you have to have a use of proceeds for the capital. If they can't clearly articulate what some of those things are, then it really does send some red flags, such as where does every dollar go? What's the profitability? Are you building capability or just burning cash? And then the risk assessment is, can you handle the processing to scale 5, 10x? What's your path to an A? I usually invest in companies that are seed or pre-seed. They're way before the A round, because I feel like that's where I can be more beneficial to the founders. So if there's not a clear path to the A, that's also another red flag. But again, a lot of this comes with just general knowledge about the business, about the industry, about economics, about the macro trends that are forcing, like, for example, AI. If they can't tell me how they're integrating AI into their business or how AI is impacting their business, that's also another red flag. It tells me that they have a lot of bias toward their own personal problem or solution, and that they're not really being objective when it comes to a full competitive scan of both the risk and opportunity and the competitive landscape.
Thank you. So, how do Cape Fear Ventures evaluate early stage startups in terms of market opportunity, competitive advantage, and scalability? And what frameworks or metrics do you prioritize when assessing potential return on investment?
Yeah, so first off, Cape Fear Ventures is just me right now. At some point, we may raise money in the future, but right now, I've taken some capital from other successful ventures and cash flow from real estate that I've created, and to really fund this portfolio management of venture investments. So really, I look at the T's, which I call them, the team, the founder, the management team, and the people that are running the business, that have the vision, the fortitude, and the passion. And I look at, like I said, their grit, their determination, their resilience, their experience, and their level of fortitude of how they handle problems. I look at the technology. I look at to find out exactly how does this problem, or how does this solution work? Does it have IP? Did you file a patent? Is it patentable? What are the competitors? I look at traction. Obviously you look at customers. Who are they talking to, their pipeline, what kind of churn they have. Churn is when customer turnover happens. So you may have a customer and they leave. I want to know why, what happened. And then you look at the total addressable market, the TAM, at a high level. So typically when I get a pitch or a deck from a founder, I can size it up in about 10 or 15 minutes. Like I'll just kind of focus in that area. After spending 5, 10 minutes talking about their background and what they're trying to solve, I'll get right into tell about the team, give me the technology dump, like what's behind it, how do you build it, what code did you lever, where is it hosted, what's the stack look like? Because again, being a coder myself and a technical operator, I can ask really detailed questions that normal VCs can't ask. And then we talk about traction and customer development and pipeline, and then we talk about the market that they're operating in, and then you can kind of get a really good vision within 30 minutes on, is this something that I really want to spend more time on, to do due diligence and figure out if this is something to make an investment in or not. So that's kind of our model. I don't do a spray and pray. There's a lot of funds out there that'll put like $5, $10, $15,000 in 100 different companies and hope one will make a dent. I'm very methodical. I pick only a few funds to work with. And when I do, I go deep with them. So I want to really know the founder. I want to know their technology, their background, their families. I want to go out for a beer, dinner, cookout. I want to spend time. I want to meet their spouse, because I know it's a big commitment for the family as well. So before I really spend a lot of money, I really want to make sure that the individual's committed and they are who they say they are, as well as the technology and how the business can scale.
Thank you. Our next question is, as someone who has moved from building startups to now investing in them, how has your perspective on entrepreneurship changed? What would you look for in founders and startups today that you might have brushed over when you were first starting your company?
Having experience on both sides of the table, being an operator and now an investor, has provided some really valuable insight in helping, and it, to me, crafting my solutions of how to help the next generation of founders. My own personal investment philosophy has evolved dramatically. I moved from growth at all costs to sustainable value creation, from visionary ideas to proven business models, from market size to market penetration strategy, and from founder passion to more founder competence. So again, as technology evolves and the business model becomes more innovative, you really have to focus to do a little more risk avoidance when it comes to deploying capital than just taking your own money and bootstrapping it yourself. You could be a little more crazy and risky with your own capital, which I bootstrapped both of my first startups. So I didn't have any investors. So I just went really crazy and wild and kind of just did moonshots all over the place. But now I really focus on evolutionary improvements and reliability, security, and trust. I want proven operators with track records rather than high growth potential and disruptive tech. So I really prioritize unit economics, retention, and building competitive moats for the future. Because again, I want to protect my capital, but again, I want to grow it as well. And I have to balance risk with reward. So that's been one major change in how I from an operator to an investor.
Thank you. Many early stage founders struggle to balance product development with customer acquisition. From your perspective, what is the best way for a startup team to validate its product market fit without overextending resources too early?
Yeah, this has been a classic problem with a lot of startups where, again, they create an idea and they talk to their friends and they all believe like it's the best next thing, but they need customer validation. So you don't want to go and build the product you think the customer wants. You want to take an idea or a solution to a customer and form factor it to their expectations and say, hey, we've identified a problem. Do you think that's a trackable problem? Is that something that we should put some traction to or not? And again, kids get excited, people get excited, and they start building these things, and they spend capital, time, energy, and effort, and they build something that nobody wants. And then they go out and try to raise money. And again, the customer base hasn't validated that there's a need. So that's one of the things that we look for, early on is like, has your product or solution been validated? Who validated it? How do they validate it? What does that MVP look like? What kind of customer traction do you have? How many customers have been validated? Do you have betas? So one of my first investments I got into recently under Cape Fear, they had 13 customers. So at that point, I knew that they had an MVP that was well validated. They were making about $300K in revenue. And the technology was really, really good. And I knew it could scale. Now they have over 200 customers. So there's an example. Another story I did on a podcast recently, Daniel Summers, he created a company called LabLogs, which effectively, when you go into a medical facility and you get blood, they have to run the blood samples or other samples, bodily samples, against this machine to come out and spit out your results. Well, those machines not only have to be cleaned, but have to be validated, tested every single day and certified. And for whatever reason in the industry they were working on, the validation and the data was being collected on manual notebooks. So he came up with an idea of creating like an electronic version of what they were tracking. And one customer turned to four turned to 10. So it's a good example of like really focusing on a problem that somebody has and knowing that in the industry, they all do the same thing because again, it's equipment, it's standardized. A lot of the equipment makers force the lab technician operators to do the same policies and procedures to record this data. He just figured out a niche by just looking at a problem to make more efficient data collection. So that's a great example of what to do and how to validate your product. So hopefully that that answers your question on how founders can really transition from a sales mode, but not go too crazy until they get a product validated.
Thank you. So our next question is, as a managing partner at Cape Fear Ventures, you focus on business-to-business software as a service and champion the concept of founder-led sales. For the many technical founders who are experts at building a product but intimidated by selling it, what is the single most important mindset shift they must make to effectively lead sales in the early stages and build that 10 million blueprint you talk about?
Yes, that's one of the things we actually cover in my Elevate CEO class. Getting somebody who's validated a product from like 50K to like 200K to like 2 million, whatever. The psychology of marketing and scaling that product is very, very hard. And one of the things I've learned in my experience is that customers, well, just like in relationships as well, there's a cost to change, and then there's a cost of staying the same. And just because somebody is not in a perfect situation, whether it be a relationship or a product or an environment, there's a level of discomfort and pain that we're all willing to tolerate because we're emotional people. And there's going to be a certain point where that pain escalates to a point where, you know what, I may have to have a change. And changing anything, whether it's changing a product, changing software, it's an emotional decision. And there's fear. And human beings focus more on fear than achievement for some odd reason. So they fear of making somebody upset, or they fear of the cost of change. They fear people won't take it. They fear loss of sales. They fear loss of customers. I mean, there's all kinds of fear, but there's this level of achievements like, hey, we have so much better solution for you. Why don't you give it a shot? So I think it's really, from a psychology point of view, understanding your customer's fear and painting a picture of, hey, if you don't mitigate this fear and this pain that you're having now, it's going to be much worse in the future. And that really starts the conversation of how you transition from one product to your product, and what that path looks like. And one of my companies I invested in, we're dealing with that situation now, where it's an industry that has hundreds of years, beverage industry, and they're using archaic technology. And we're talking about an ERP system that can manage 20, 30, 40,000 people and hundreds of thousands of SKUs in the back end. It's very expensive to change something like that. There's a cost to change. But obviously, if their solution's not giving them the insight, and especially around AI and the predictability future, and to manage inventory, to cut costs, to be more efficient, then they're giving up future profits where they can make an investment today for the change. So you really have to understand your product market fit. You understand your customer needs, the pain, and what that change, that cost to change is for every customer, so that you can help alleviate some of that fear and start turning these no's into yeses when it comes to converting your customer base and your traction.
Thank you. Our next question is, based on your experience mentoring or observing other founders, what are some of the most common mistakes entrepreneurs make during the early stages of building their business? More importantly, what strategies or mindsets can students like us adopt to avoid repeating those same errors?
Specific early stage traps, I would say building in isolation, meaning that you're not talking to customers until your product is ready. Obviously, you want to get the customer's ear early and often, and have a feedback loop at all times to help your customer development strategy. Feature obsession, adding complexity instead of solving core problems. Again, that comes into bias, your cognitive bias, where you think this product is better. Like, oh my God, if I was using this product, I would want to do this. Well, you need to talk to your customer because they're the ones that's actually paying for it. Hiring and spending before product market fit. People love the concept of, I'm going to hire people and build this enterprise and go get an office and get all the tchotchkes and the hoodies with your logo on it, and you're burning capital really to no end. So you really have to be smart about that. tracking usage instead of revenue and retention. I think that's also a big one. And founder dependency, making yourself essential to every decision or process. That's another focus we do at my conference is we focus on founder bottlenecks. Why does every founder have to be everything to everybody? That's a fallacy. You can't. You have to build a team and delegate and work through structure and process so that you can scale. If you're working in your business and not on your business, then you're not scaling and growing. So you have to focus expansion on the business, how to make the business better instead of being a cog in the wheel of your own business. So I think obviously advantages for students and early founders, talk to 50 potential customers before writing the first code. I know that can be difficult, but talk to as many customers as possible to kind of get the feedback of the problem before you start really doing code or using AI to vibe code. Validate the pain points, make sure it exists, and it's not just some fallacy, and understand how people are going to pay for it. What is that price point that people are willing to pay for that solution? Build MVPs, your minimum viable products, and test quickly and often. Don't spend a lot of time building. Build something and get it in the hands of the customer and let them validate, let them tinker on it a little bit and figure out if this works or doesn't work. Track unit economics every day, not just growth, but how you're managing your burn, and document your processes and decisions. That's one. Operational, understand where money comes from. The cost of capital is real. Interest rates are up and it costs money to use money, whether you're being diluted or you're using debt or you're bootstrapping. It doesn't really matter. You really have to get your hands around that and understand it. Track your indicators that drive business decisions and hire for the skills you lack, not just the people you like. Obviously, if family comes in the picture there, I could go a whole nother session about working with family and the pros and cons, but just be very careful when you're working with family. And strategic planning, do regular reviews and make a priority of resources that you have and what you need. It really comes down to embracing a mindset and really understand what are your measures of success and how are you going to overcome some of your failures. It's going to be hard. None of this is easy. If it were easy, everybody would be doing it or would be successful. I believe the failure rate for small business, 1 to 3 years, is like 90%. So the failure rate is very, very, very high. So you really have to understand what you're doing and be very specific and strategic with how you execute and have the discipline to do the hard things and make the hard decisions.
Thank you. Many startups face intense pressure to scale quickly, sometimes at the cost of culture, quality, or ethics. How can emerging entrepreneurs build companies that grow efficiently while still maintaining integrity, sustainability, and a positive work environment?
Well, it goes back to the question about making a decent profit decently. It's really easy today to cut corners and to cheat and to try to strong arm people into doing things, misleading your financials, misleading your investors, overpromise and underdeliver. You get caught up into the whole passion of fundraising, of building a business, and the vanity behind, I'm a founder CEO. That ego gets to some people and they go kind of crazy. You really, really, really have to have discipline, hard discipline to kind of steer right and build a decent business and not cut corners and not do things the easy way and cheat and mislead your investors and mislead your stakeholders, mistreat your employees. I've heard several examples of harassment inside of companies, obviously sexual harassment, but just harassment in general, where people throwing things and mistreating people. We have to understand that we're human beings and that we need to treat people with respect and decency. And that comes with customers as well. So if you can't treat your own employees well, then you can't treat your customers well either. Because when your employees love where they work and they love their management team and their leaders, that shows into the customers. That shows into how they treat customers. Company culture is everything. One toxic person can ruin a company culture overnight. So as a leader, not only you have to inspire and really reward people for their effort and success, but also push the boundaries of growth and challenge people. But you have to be respectful. And you have to have boundaries and enforce boundaries and enforcing accountability. So if you find out somebody in your sales division is bribing people, I've seen that. They need to go, need to be fired. It's another anecdote I say is hire slow, but fire fast. So you need to have your head on a swivel at all times to make sure that your company culture is intact, that you really build something solid, that's decent, that's integrity is at the forefront of your business mission. And it shows with customer traction and the turnover that you could have, because obviously people want to work with good people. So
Our next question is, when you talk about helping sub $3 million founders build $10 million blueprints, you often emphasize energy, structure, and clarity over hustle. At what point in your own journey did you realize that teaching and mentoring founders was more impactful than chasing your next big exit? And how has that changed the way you measure your success today?
yeah, it's been a journey for me personally. I've had some setbacks, and it hasn't been easy. When I was going through my businesses, I had to make some hard decisions. I missed out on a lot of my early child activities because I had to work, had to travel, had to do things. And it's a sacrifice that we all have to make. And I try to teach when I do guest lectures or activities like this. I always want to make sure that they understand that there's a cost of everything. If you want an easy life, that has good income, work for a company that has a good culture and a good salary, incentive package, and provide some PTO, paid time off to spend time with your family. Because again, we're working to live, not living to work. But you can get caught up in it because once this entrepreneurship bug gets into you, it becomes a life. Building my first company was like a baby. And going through that process, you get very emotional. And even when I sold my first business, I was very depressed a couple of weeks after. Even though I sold it for $24 million, that didn't matter. What mattered is my people. They're gonna be mistreated. Now you're just kind of handing it over to somebody else to manage. And it's a hard pill to swallow. And I think over time, you just try to take some of the losses that you have, the missed time that you spend with family members. In most cases, that's more important than the success of business. And everything has a trade-off. And I think every founder needs to have a good, solid practice of a work-life balance where you spend your time working, you have your career and your goals and your incentives, but you also have to factor in life. And if you get married, and if you have family, if you have kids, and you want to spend time with your family, if you move away from them, how often are you going to see them? The last couple of years, I've had family members to pass away, and it left a big dent in my life. Now I've reached a point in my life where I actually have time to do things, and the people that matter most to me are no longer here. And I think about that all the time. So really, I think you just have to focus on what matters the most to the individual and do the best you can about creating a work-life balance that can meet your goals and your objectives, but also doesn't sacrifice your life and the people that matter most.
What trends or shifts do you see shaping the next generation of entrepreneurs, and what skills do you think will matter most for them to succeed?
Yes, trends. I believe every founder should always have their head on a swivel looking at macroeconomic trends. If you look to see what's happening with China, with foreign policy, with interest rates, with the spending that our country is doing, the value of a dollar, asset prices, it all has an impact. And it also drives decisions on what you can and can't do, back to the cost of capital. So I think it's very important that you do stay abreast of what's happening in the world and try to make the best decisions that obviously won't impact your business or your lifestyle, because we're seeing decisions being made that are impacting everyone in this country. Whether you're buying a car, buying a house, borrowing money for debt to start a business, customers that are impacted by their supply chains, the government being shut down right now. I mean, you may work in the public sector, not the private sector, but many private sector companies have public sector exposure. So there's ebbs and flows, and you just have to understand to keep account of that. Technology trends, obviously AI, infrastructure, building reliable, secure, trustworthy AI versus flashy demos. Really honing in on the AI technology to help with coding, to help reduce your operations. It's been good for some things, but you need to make sure that code is clean and usable and it works. Not all AI is the same. I mean, it's getting better, but you really have to spend more time on that. Defense technology, I think right now we're in a rebirth phase. We'll talk about creating new opportunities in secure software, hardware, drones. Obviously with cyber and AI, hackers are going to be prevalent. Personally, I'm deploying more money into cyber companies, both on the public side and the private side. I think cyber is going to be a big, big, big opportunity in the future because AI is like pouring gas on a fire when it comes to cyber. I mean, you learned a couple of weeks ago on 60 Minutes that China has been hacking into infrastructure systems, like water systems of tiny small towns, like in Pennsylvania and probably some in Indiana. They're learning. You know, this is a command and control risk that we have where you don't want a country or an adversary to control sophisticated systems that we must now do what they say. Otherwise, they'll shut our water off. It's something to think about. Distributed work, remote companies, sustainability, business models that improve environmental outcomes, data privacy. We talked about the cyber risk. Skills for you all to think about: operational discipline. I think cash flow management, unit economics, and systems. Invest in an accounting class, or if you don't take accounting in college, you can learn accounting on the fly. There's like Khan Academy and other places, but learn balance sheet, learn profit loss, what goes into them. Do some finagling and learn looking at different P&Ls and balance sheets of different kinds of companies. And because that was a very interesting case study that we did at Harvard, where they gave us 10 different P&Ls and balance sheets, and we had to choose what business sector they were, like defense, supermarkets, web, or IT. It's really interesting that they all kind of have their own type of rhythm that they operate in. AI fluency, learn how to integrate AI without being disrupted by it. I do think that's a future, is that there's a fear of people being replaced by AI. I think those with AI skills are going to replace people without AI skills. So I would highly recommend taking some type of AI architecture or course, or getting really, really deep into AI technology. Cross-domain thinking, applying insights from one industry to another is a great perspective. We talked about the global international markets, and obviously stakeholder management, learning to work with boards and investors, learn case studies of other successful ventures that you know of or experience is always good.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. Throughout the course of this interview, we have talked about you as an investor, about you as a founder, you as a family person, and we had like so many professional and personal insights to gain from you. So thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Absolutely. Thanks again, and good luck with your class this semester.
So I just had like one last question for you. Was there ever a moment in your career, I know you've touched upon this, but when you realized that success didn't mean what you initially thought it would?
Yeah, there's been a couple examples. I'll tell you one personal. I was that guy who was working 80 hours a week because I was a perfectionist and I enjoyed it and I loved it and I wanted to be in the business at all times. But I was actually having some personal problems as well. And now that I've found that I'm an avoidant, I was avoiding my problems by focusing on work because that was an easier outlet to do. It caught up with me and I had to go to the doctor, and I found out that I had a medical problem and I had to have surgery. And it was nothing serious, but it was an alarm bell for me that I was like, wow, you're 33 years old. Your kids are very young. You're working way too much. You're stressed. Your body's telling you, hey, you need to make some adjustments. And I did. Then that's about the time I went to Harvard OPM class and then got the bright idea to sell my company. And then I sold it the very next year. That's one. But then two, after selling my first company, I got really depressed. I thought having $15 million in the bank would be life-changing, but really it wasn't. Yeah, I could pay off my debts. I could pay my mortgage. I paid off my student loans. I did my 529 prepayment plans for my kids. But it was like, what's next? Like, what do I do now? And I eventually left my company. It got really depressed. Started my next company, which made me very happy. I built that one for 9 years, and I sold 75% of that to private equity. And I left the company in 22 after experiencing some personal problems with my mom and her husband and my dad. And there again, it was another life reminder that even though you had all this success and you had tons of money, what really matters in life is finding purpose. And it's taken me a long time to figure out that if you don't have a purpose in life and you don't have something to make you happy, you can fall into a deep, deep depression, no matter how much money you have, which is why you could do some research and finding that like founders who sell their company for millions of dollars, they leave the company for whatever reason, and then they get depressed. And being young, you're like, wow, if I was a millionaire, I would travel, I'll do this, I will do that. But no, you won't. If you have kids, have responsibilities, and they have homework and tests, and you have to stay in the grind and day-to-day stuff. And then you have a non-compete that you can't work in the same industry that you're in. What do you do now? Which is why I became a venture capitalist. And that's why I had to move out of the software world. And technically, I'm still under non-compete from a private equity buyer that I can't do software where I live. So yeah, it's interesting that you have to put things in perspective and don't lose your true North Star. Don't lose yourself in your business and the capture of being success, because really success has different definitions to different people. But as long as you're happy and you're finding peace within yourself, and no matter how much money you have, that to me is a true item of success. So.
Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable with us. And I genuinely hope that you and all your loved ones are in the pink of health now.
Thank you so much. Again, good luck to your semester and Bowler Up.
Amplified CEO is produced by Topsail Insider, edited by Mendes-Pouget, and sponsored by Cape Fear Ventures. For more information about Amplified CEO, Richard Stroupe, or Cape Fear Ventures, please contact Christa at 910-800-0111 or Christa at topsailinsider.com.